On the connective tissues, they're a little more complicated than the other tissues because they're so diverse, but they all come from embryonic mesenchyme. So that'll be the first slide that we see, even though you do not have to identify mesenchyme. I'll just show you what it looks like. And they all have three things that you want to look at. You want to look at the type of cells that they have ground substance in the background, and then they all have fibers. They usually have different amounts of collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. So that's what you want to focus on: the ground substance, the fibers, and the different types of cells that they have. So these are the categories, and we'll look at these in order: the connective tissue proper, category, and then we'll see the cartilages, and then other. And we'll do it in this order right here. So these three tissues right here, by the way, areolar connective tissue or areolar connective tissue, adipose and reticular, these are the loose connective tissues, and dense regular and dense irregular and elastic are the dense connective tissues. And we call these the loose connective tissues because the fibers are arranged loosely, and these are the dense connective tissues because the fibers are arranged densely. So let's get to that first one. Here's mesenchyme. All of the connective tissues come from mesenchyme. This is a tissue slide that you will not have to identify, but it's in your book, so I thought I would show it to you. That's what ties all of these connective tissues together because they look so incredibly different from one another. And here's our first tissue type. This is areolar connective tissue or areolar connective tissue. I could care less how you guys say it. But these are the different fiber types. The one thing about areolar connective tissue, we call this our prototype tissue because it has everything that I was talking about. It has ground substance in the background. This is the ground substance, and the ground substance is it's not very viscous. It's not very thick. It has the consistency of molasses. And in the background we have lots of different types of cells. It has plenty of different cell types in the background. And if you look in the book, there's an artist picture of areolar connective tissue, and you really need to check that out because you'd see all the different types of cell types. This might be a macrophage. This might be the nucleus of a fibroblast. There might be some lymphocytes in there. We can't see the fat cells because they wouldn't stain very well. There might be some mast cells. This might be the nucleus to a mast cell. In the background there could be some neutrophils. They're all different types of cells in areolar connective tissue. You just really can't tell one cell from another when you see a preparation like this. And really areolar connective tissue, when we're looking at other types of tissues, when we've been seeing them in slides, I've been pointing out areolar connective tissue. In all of our tissues, you usually find a scanty amount of areolar connective tissue under all epithelial tissue, but it doesn't look like this. It looks like this when you see a slide of just areolar connective tissue because they've taken it and they pulled it out so you can see all the fibers. So when you look at all the other types, when you look at epithelial tissue, notice how I always point out areolar connective tissue just underneath it, slightly just underneath it, and it'll look different. But here's how it looks like when we have a prepared slide of just areolar connective tissue. So we have all these different cell types. Just assume when you see these little purple dots here that these are the nuclei to fibroblast cells. And fibroblast cells are the main cell type for areolar connective tissue, and what those fibroblast cells do are make all of these fiber types. And the biggest fiber type that you see here would be the collagen fibers, and they're arranged in a very loose manner all over the place. And collagen fibers, what they do is give this tissue its tensile strength. Collagen fibers are always our strongest fibers. They're the most numerous type of fiber in the body, but their tensile strength means they're very strong if you pull them in one direction. And then here, these little blue fibers that are all over the place, these are elastic fibers, and elastic fibers, just as their name suggests, are really elastic. So if you pull them, they recoil very well. And then these smaller fibers in the background, they're also made of a type of a collagen fiber, but we call them reticular fibers. They're extensions right off these collagen fibers. We call them reticular fibers. And what a reticulum is it's a network. And so it forms sort of a stroma, a network platform for other cells to basically have a supporting network for them to live on, you can think. So that's what the reticular fibers are for support. This is another picture of areolar connective tissue. The fibers here are just more pronounced, and you see a lot of cell types here. This might be a fibroblast, this might be a macrophage here and here. So you can't really identify the different cell types, or I'm not good at it anyway. And these are the collagen fibers. The biggest ones are the collagen fibers, the smallest ones are the elastic fibers, and the medium-sized ones are the reticular fibers. But what you want to notice with the areolar connective tissue is it just looks a mess. We have a loose arrangement of fibers, and I want you to compare this tissue type with nervous tissue, because areolar connective tissue and nervous tissue, they're the two types that you might mix up. But when you compare them side by side, you'll see that they don't look anything alike. Nervous tissue has neurons, areolar connective tissue does not. Whoops. So those are our two slides of areolar connective tissue. So where do you find this in the body? This is a very extremely abundant connective tissue because it's found under all epithelial layers. At least a scanty amount is found under all epithelial layers. It's very widely distributed. It's around blood vessels, and if you have any swelling, this is the part of your body that's retaining water. So, for instance, if you get a mosquito bite and you get localized swelling, it's going to be in your areolar connective tissue. So it holds a lot of your body's water. So I guess we could say the function of this areolar connective tissue would be it wraps and cushions organs, and it supports your epithelial tissue. And because it has so many white blood cells, it plays an important role in inflammation. So for your lab practical, you can pick any of those functions that you want, like wraps and cushions organs, or it helps with inflammation. For location, I would choose it's under all epithelial tissue in the body. This is adipose tissue. It's your next loose connective tissue. You would identify it as adipose tissue. You would classify it as connective tissue. You don't have to say it's loose connective tissue. You don't have to go that far. You just have to say it's connective tissue. And this might look like simple squamous epithelium to you, but this is just one whole cell right here, and its nucleus has been squashed out to the side. So if you want to compare this to the simple squamous epithelium of the lung, you can, and you can see how different they actually look. And so here's a fat cell. These are all individual fat cells, and what these are, this is all of this inside, this full of triglycerides. So if you want to go back to chapter 2 and remember what triglycerides are, those are your cells those are a glycerol head with 3 fatty acid tails, and it's our main storage form of fat. So here's an adipocyte, and a adipocyte, that's our name for our fat cells. So each one of these are fat cells, and we store these right underneath our skin. That's one place that we store these. We call that subcutaneous storage of fat, and it's a big fuel reserve. That's what fat is. It's our fuel reserve. It also helps insulate us against heat loss, so that's another storage, another function of fat. So our location would be underneath the skin. Also, we find it around organs to help cushion us, and around underneath our eyeballs. We find it in breasts, so those are the locations. Notice in this tissue, our cell type would be adipocytes or fat cells. We don't really see any fibers at all, like in the other, like back here in areolar connective tissues, we see all these fibers. We don't really see many fibers at all in fat. Here's another slide of fat, but it's more up close. So here we see the big fat cell with its nucleus pushed out to the side. You don't see any other organelles because this entire inner region of the fat cell is full of triglycerides. Here's another one. These are all fat cells. And here's another slide of fat. It's kind of boring, isn't it? So this is adipose tissue. And that's just what it looks like. It looks like air bubbles coming off the end of a little air bubble wand. On this slide, can you locate where you can see the fat? All of this up here, this is all fat. Don't worry about this down here, but that's fat. This is reticular tissue. This is our last loose connective tissue picture. These are all the reticular fibers here, and there are no other fiber types in the reticular tissue. Notice how they're very large, the reticular fibers in some areas, and then they get smaller. That says your identification for this tissue. You don't see elastic fibers, and you don't see collagen fibers. And this is a great slide of reticular tissue. All these other cells in the background, these are lymphocytes, because where we find reticular tissue tends to be in lymphoid organs like your spleen or your lymph nodes or bone marrow. And so what reticulum means, or reticular means, these reticular fibers, like I said, this means a network. And so what these reticular fibers are doing, are they're forming a little skeleton, a little network for these to support these cells. So these cells have a nice stroma background for them to reside upon. So I think I've said it all. In reticular tissue, you find mostly reticular fibers, and the location would be in the spleen, the bone marrow, or the lymph nodes, and the function would be to form a nice soft stroma, a nice soft skeleton to support cells. Let's look at another picture of reticular tissue. There's another reticular tissue. And what kind of fibers are these? These are reticular fibers. And so this is probably again in the spleen. And these are just white blood cells in the background. Now on Lab Practical Day, I'm not going to ask you what cell types these are in the background. I'm going to ask you, what is this tissue? Identify it. If you identify it, it's reticular. If you classify it, it's connective tissue. Where do you find this type of tissue? You can find it in the spleen, you can find it in lymph nodes, and you can find it in bone marrow. And then for the function of this tissue, it would be to form a soft network for cells, or a stroma. So those are the four things I would ask you. I wouldn't ask you what is the cell type. But if you've watched this lecture and you remember it, if I asked you the cell type, it would be for an extra credit kind of a question. Okay, so we've gone through half of our connective tissue proper. Now we'll go through the next half. Those first three slides were for the loose connective tissues. Now we're going on to our dense connective tissues. And the first type of dense connective tissue is dense regular connective tissue, because the fibers are arranged in a regular pattern. And so here are fibers here, and they're running in a regular pattern. All the pink things are our fibers. See these little black things? These little black things are the nuclei to fibroblast cells. We only have collagen fibers and dense regular connective tissue. They're the only type of fiber. And the only type of cell that we have are fibroblast cells. And so it's our big identifier for this type of tissue. We have collagen fibers running in one direction in a regular pattern, hence the name dense regular connective tissue. And we only have one cell type. And you can't see the cells themselves, you only see their nuclei. And here are the nuclei right here. Here are the nuclei. to the fibroblast, and the fibroblasts actually make the collagen fibers. And the collagen fibers are so dense that the fibroblasts are squished between them, and so usually there you can see the fibroblasts line up in a row. On this slide you can't see fibroblasts lining up in a row like you might see a fibroblast nucleus here, and then you would see another one, and then another one, and another one, all lined up in a row because they're squished between these linear collagen fibers. For dense regular connective tissue, all these collagen fibers are running in one direction for a reason. Collagen fibers are for tensile strength. And so if we have a bunch of collagen fibers running in one direction, that must mean we're going to pull these collagen fibers in this direction and in this direction. So this tissue is getting pulled linearly. This is a tendon, and a muscle's probably pulling in this direction or in this direction. So dense regular connective tissue would be our ligaments and our tendons. That's where we find them, in our ligaments and our tendons. And the purpose of them, the function of them, is to attach muscle to bone or or bone to bone. So that's our function. And it withstands tensile strength in one direction, pulling forces in one direction. So location is ligaments and tendons, and function is withstanding tension in one direction. Let's look at another picture. Here's another one. Same exact tissue type. And this one, this is great because it is showing you these little slit-like nuclei. The collagen fibers are all running together here. It's the pink in the background. But you can see how here's a slit-like nucleus. Here's one, here's one, here's one. You can see all the nuclei to the fibroblast lining up in one row. This is your big indicator that you're looking at dense, regular connective tissue. Dense, regular connective tissue. People mix this one up with smooth muscle. You're not going to mix this one up with smooth muscle, because write this down in your notes. I'm going to compare dense, regular connective tissue with smooth muscle. The nuclei don't look anything like the nuclei for smooth muscle. In smooth muscle, the nuclei are bigger and oval, and they have lots of nucleoli. For dense regular, they're slit-like this, and they line up in a row. So compare the nuclei to smooth muscle to the nuclei in dense regular connective tissue, and you won't have a problem. But do compare this slide to smooth muscle, because you'll mess them up if you don't. Here's another picture of dense regular connective tissue. So you can see how this picture, and this picture might not look anything alike to you, but they are the same tissue at different magnifications. These are all pictures of tendons and ligaments. It's all dense regular connective tissue, and the unifying force here, the unifying factor, would be the collagen fibers running in one direction and these slit-line nuclei of the fibroblast. So here it is again, and here it is again, just up close. Here's a fibroblast nucleus, a fibroblast nucleus, a fibroblast nucleus, and a fibroblast nucleus. And here it is again and again and again. Now, I really wanted to show you this slide because this slide can also look like skeletal muscle, because it just can. If you want to refer to this slide and skeletal muscle, and the big difference between this slide and skeletal muscle, there are no striations that would be running in this direction perpendicular to these cells like this. So if you'll take the time to look at the skeletal muscle slides and this one and see how there are no striations, you'll see what I'm talking about. But these are the fibroblast nuclei, all in a row. So I hope you believe me by now. You're like, yep, she's telling the truth. Slit-like fibroblast. These are the collagen fibers here. This must be a ligament or a tendon, and the purpose is to resist pulling in one direction. Now we're moving on to the next dense connective tissue. Down here, I hope you recognize this is fat down here. We see some fat down here. This is all what fat tissue looks like. But up here, this is dense irregular connective tissue. These are all collagen fibers, and we see the nuclei to fibroblast here. The fibroblasts are the cells that actually make these collagen fibers. But the collagen fibers up here appear to be woven because they're running in lots of different directions. And the reason we would have collagen fibers running in lots of different directions is because we want to withstand pulling in lots of different directions. And so this is dense, irregular connective tissue. And if you want to refer to what that looks like in your book, the picture in your book is more purpley, but this is what it looks like when it's red. This is dense, irregular connective tissue. And we find this in areas like in the dermis of your skin, because your skin has to be pulled in many different directions. And we also find it in joint capsules, like the joint capsule around your shoulder, because you're going to be moving in very many different directions. So those are two locations you can have, in the dermis of your skin and in the joint capsules. So it has to withstand tension in many different directions. So we would classify this as, we would identify it as dense, irregular, and we would classify it as connective tissue. Here's another picture of that. So this is far away, and if we want to look at it up close, all of these are just collagen fibers swishing around in different directions. And here are the nuclei to those fibroblasts that make the collagen fibers. So this is magnified at one level. Here's up close, and here is very far away. This is skin. Up here we have the epidermis. This is keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium, if you've already seen that slide, if you've already reviewed the epithelial. This is keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium up here, like this. And then all of this right here that looks woven, all of this big area down here, we call this our dermis, and this is dense, irregular connective tissue. Down here we have fat in the hypodermis. This is a layer of fat, but all of this is, there's a hair, by the way, and there's the, there is an oil gland, a sebaceous gland, but that is a hair. But this is dense, irregular connective tissue. That's what it looks like from further away. And there is another up-close picture. I think this is a really pretty picture. It's dense, irregular connective tissue. Look at all those collagen fibers running in different directions. Hopefully you're getting a nice search image pattern here. They're not, and it's, the name says it all, dense, irregular connective tissue. Now our last connective tissue proper is called elastic tissue. You have to say that word, you have to say it elastic. I would say elastic connective tissue, because we're going to have an elastic cartilage. So write down elastic connective tissue so it doesn't confuse you. If you've put elastic tissue, it's going to be okay, but you have to put elastic cartilage, so you get it wrong if you don't put elastic cartilage when we're in the cartilage session. So if you put elastic connective tissue, it might help you out here. So this is what elastic connective tissue looks like. It has all these squiggly lines. You don't see any background cells. You don't see any background ground substance. You just see these squiggly lines. And what these squiggly lines are, as the name suggests, would be elastic fibers. So these are all elastic fibers. And the purpose of the tissue is recoil. It's elasticity. So it allows all, if something stretches out, its function is to recoil after stretching. The biggest place I want you to know where you find this is in the aorta. And there's also some other ligaments that, there are very few ligaments, like the ligamentum nuchae in the neck. And the aorta would be the easiest place for you to know that you could find this. So here's one view of it up close. Here's a little further away. This is in the aorta. So it looks a little mess, but all of these are elastic fibers. Oh, those are our only two pictures. So this is closer up, elastic tissue, and these are farther away. So the identification would be elastic connective tissue, and its classification would be connective tissue. Its location would be the aorta, or the ligamentum nuchae, if you want to put that down. But it's a very specific ligament, and it's spelled N-U-C-H-A-E, and its function would be recoil after stretching. So that is it for connective tissue proper, and we're on to our cartilages. Our first cartilage is hyaline cartilage, and On the cartilages, the background is solid. So all of this background that you see here is a solid background. And what I look for are sets of owl eyes, like these things. This is actually a lacuna. This is a little cave that a chondrocyte lives in. So here's our chondrocyte. And when the chondroblasts, those are the cells that make cartilage, when chondroblasts are making cartilage, they get trapped after they make this solid background matrix here. And when they get trapped in a little cave called a lacuna, and then they convert over from a chondroblast to a chondrocyte. So here's a chondrocyte, here's a chondrocyte, here's a chondrocyte, here's a chondrocyte. It's actually the nucleus to a chondrocyte, but they're trapped in these little caves. And when two chondrocytes get together, they remind me of a set of eyes looking back at you. So I call them owl eyes. I don't know why. Like owl, like the animal. O-W-L, owl. So I look for little sets of eyes looking at me. And when I see owl eyes, a little pair of owl eyes looking at me, I know I'm looking at cartilage. So now the thing about hyaline cartilage is hyaline means glassy. So if you see a smooth background here, you know you're looking at hyaline cartilage. Owl eyes plus a smooth background, it's hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is found, it's the most numerous cartilage found in the body, so it's going to be found in a lot of places. Its function is supporting and reinforcing different organs. It is very resilient. I would say the best function that you can put is resisting compressive stress. Resisting compressive stress. So if you squeeze it, then it's going to bounce back. So some locations for this. It makes up the embryonic skeleton. It's found in your nose. It's also at the end of long bones. It makes up your costal cartilages in your lungs. I mean, not your lungs, I should say. It attaches your sternum to your ribs. It's also found in your trachea and in your larynx. And it's also found, those are enough locations right there. Here's another set. Oh, there's some good owl eyes right there. They look like owls. Don't they look like owl eyes peeking out at you? Now this is hyaline cartilage. It's not as smooth in the background, but when we get to the other cartilages, you'll see that this is relatively smooth. So this is hyaline cartilage here. And here's another hyaline cartilage. Relatively smooth in the background. As smooth as it can go. Looks like 1970s wallpaper to me. Now, see, this is not smooth at all, is it? I see my little eyeballs looking at me everywhere. There's a little set of eyeballs right there. This is fibrocartilage. The biggest indicator that you've got fibrocartilage is that you can actually see collagen fibers. Now, back here in hyaline cartilage, we do have collagen fibers, but they're so fine that you can't see them in this matrix. In fibrocartilage is found in way different locations than hyaline cartilage. Fibrocartilage, its function is to resist much more strong compression. I mean, we really need tensile strength for compressive shock when it comes to fibrocartilage, because it's going to be found in places like the menisci of the knee, and the pubic symphysis, and also the intervertebral discs. And so those are places where you have much more compressive shock there. I mean, like for instance, if you jump off of a house, don't do that, but if you jump off of a house, you're going to take the shock in your vertebrae and in your knees, and hopefully not your pubic symphysis, but those are areas where you're going to take a lot of shock. And so we need more collagen fibers. So here are those collagen fibers like this. All of these strings that you see here are collagen fibers, and because you have so many collagen fibers, it forces your chondrocytes to line up in a row. So if you see collagen fibers lined up in a row, you know you have fibrocartilage. Now here's some more fibrocartilage. You barely see any chondrocytes on this one, but this is fibrocartilage. You have a lot of collagen fibers in a row. On this one, This reminds me, now we've moved on to elastic cartilage. And elastic cartilage, elastic cartilage is only found in two places in your body. Elastic starts with an E, and the two places that you find it in your body also start with an E. E for ears, E's for epiglottis. So that's kind of an easy one to remember. E epiglottis, E ears, E elastic. And this kind of looks like a peacock tail, doesn't it? Also, these little things in here, the reason it's called elastic cartilage is because these little fibers you see in the background here, and there are little owl eyes right there, these are all elastic fibers. This is a much better picture because you can see all the elastic fibers in the background. And here's a set of owl eyes here because they have very narrow little piece behind them. But elastic cartilage pretty much always looks like this. Whoops. Like this or like this. The epiglottis is the structure that's going to close over your larynx every time you eat. So when you eat, the epiglottis, and you swallow, the epiglottis closes over your windpipe so you don't take that hot dog down into your trachea and choke. So the purpose of elastic cartilage is far more flexible. So we can say that the epiglottis prevents you from choking, but we don't want to go there with just calling that elastic cartilage. We'll say elastic cartilage maintains shape for your ears, maintains shape and flexibility. Now we're on to the last part of your connective tissue, the other category. This is bone. And bone doesn't look like anything else, so pretty much you should not miss bone. Bone has this nice tree ring structure. Like if you want to see how old a tree is, you look at how many rings it has. This is what compact bone looks like if you take a cross section of it. It has this central region here. This is where you find blood vessels and lymphatic vessels. You have lots of blood inside your bone, by the way, and nerve fibers. And these little regions here, these little black things, these are the osteocytes found in lacunae, little caves where the osteocytes will be. So the bone cells are these black things that you see here. And these rings all the way around here, these are made of collagen fibers. We have tons of collagen fibers in your body. So this is what bone tissue looks like. So we would classify bone tissue, we would identify this as bone tissue, and we would classify it as connective tissue. And you could say bone, don't say bone is, it's osseous tissue. So you could say osseous tissue is in your bone or in your skeleton. And you could say its function is protection. You could say it's calcium storage. You could say, that's pretty much what you could say, protection and calcium storage. Support, all of those things. Here's another view of bone. It has a very characteristic look. Hope you don't miss this one. It has a solid matrix, solid collagen matrix. Here's another picture of bone. Hard to miss bone. Bone looks like this. Never any color to it. You don't have to stain bone. Now here's blood. And blood is an odd one. Now remember, our unifying characteristic for all of these for all of these connective tissues is the fact that they are made from mesenchyme. Blood doesn't have any fibers in it. It doesn't have any fibers in the background. Here's our background ground substance. It's called plasma. We don't want any fibers in our blood because it would clog up your blood vessels. So the actual fibers in blood are soluble. That means they're dissolved in blood, and we don't want them to come out in solution. The dissolved fibers are called fibrinogen, and they come out in solution when you have a blood clot, and so that's a good thing. So in blood we have red blood cells, and we have little platelets. That's a platelet. Platelets are for clotting. Red blood cells carry oxygen. And then we have white blood cells that stain up really nice and pretty for immunity. And so those are our cell types. So this is what blood looks like. It doesn't look like anything else, so I hope you don't miss blood on the practical. And there's blood up close. Here's our white blood cell and our platelet and our red blood cells. Oops. So if you classify blood, you would identify it as blood and you would classify it as a connective tissue. That sounds weird, but it is. And the function of blood, there are quite a few functions of blood, but you could say transport respiratory gases through the body or transport nutrients through the body. You could say something like that. And where is it found? You don't say that it's found in the blood. You say that it's found in blood vessels, because blood is not found in blood. Blood is found in blood vessels. But that's how you would go that route. If you have any questions about your connective tissues before the lab practical, please come and see me, and we can look at slides in the lab during my office hours. And because it'd be really good to work that out before you take the lab practical, because they can be quite confusing.